Hello everyone, my dear viewers. In this video, real life moments reveal what it looks like when Americans bring familiar logic into a place where it simply doesn't apply. No arguments, no confrontation, just something far more unsettling. Silence, structure, and rules that don't adjust themselves.
I thought I understood tourist confusion until I watched a man in Vancouver stare at a parking meter like it had insulted him personally. He tapped the screen twice, then turned to me. "So it just charges you?" he asked slowly. I nodded. He frowned. Without negotiating. There was no sarcasm. Just a quiet realization forming, like he'd just discovered money doesn't argue back. He inserted his card carefully, like the machine might reconsider. It didn't. The timer appeared. "That's it," he said. "No options?" I pointed at the buttons. He leaned closer. "No discount for short stops? No human override?" The machine stayed silent. That's when it hit him. Not anger. Not frustration. Just absence. Like he'd reached for something that didn't exist in this country. At a cafe in Toronto, I watched an American guy try to customize his coffee beyond recognition. "Half decaf, quarter oat, 1 pump vanilla, but not too sweet," he said, smiling confidently. The barista nodded once. "We have coffee." He laughed, thinking it was humor. "Yeah, but I want it specific." She repeated, same tone. "We have coffee." Silence did the rest. He waited for elaboration. None came. "So, you don't do adjustments?" he asked. She tilted her head slightly. "You can add sugar." That was it. No menu expansion. No workaround. He stepped aside slowly, like someone exiting a conversation that had already ended without him. Behind him, the line moved exactly one person forward. The system didn't reject him. It simply didn't expand. In Calgary, I met a guy who genuinely believed Crosswalk buttons were suggestions. He pressed it once, waited 3 seconds, then crossed anyway. A car honked sharply. He turned around, offended. I pressed it, he yelled, like he'd activated a legal shield. A local woman shook her head. "You still wait." He blinked. "For what?" She pointed. The light was still red. He looked back at the button, then the traffic, then the woman. "So it doesn't change instantly?" She smiled politely. "No." That word landed heavier than expected. He stood there, processing something deeper than traffic rules. Timing wasn't flexible. It wasn't responsive. It existed independently. When the light finally changed, he crossed slower. Not because he had to, but because something inside him had adjusted first. That's the pattern. It's not that people don't understand the rule. It's that they expect the rule to understand them. In some places, systems adapt to behavior. Here, behavior adapts to systems. And the moment that flips, when someone realizes their intention doesn't matter, that's where the comedy lives. Not in the mistake. In the quiet correction that follows it.
At this point, I think nothing could surprise me anymore. Friends, I was wrong.
At a small hotel in Ottawa, I watched a man walk straight past the front desk with his suitcase. "All prepaid," he said casually, not slowing down. The receptionist smiled. "You still need to check in." He waved his phone. "It's already done online." She nodded. "Yes." "You still check in." He stopped halfway to the elevator, confused by repetition without explanation. He walked back slowly. "So what happens if I don't?" he asked. Not aggressive, just curious. The receptionist kept the same tone. "You don't get a key." That answer didn't escalate. It closed. He looked at the elevator, then back at her. For a second, you could see the calculation fail. Digital completion didn't replace physical confirmation here. He stepped forward and handed over his ID. In Montreal, I saw a man refuse to leave a museum exhibit after closing time. I paid, he said calmly, arms crossed. A staff member approached. We're closing. He didn't move. I'm not done. The staff member nodded once. The building is. That sentence changed the air. Not louder. Just final. The man looked around, as if the walls might disagree. They didn't. Lights dimmed slightly. Footsteps echoed as other visitors left. He stood there, suddenly smaller, like the space had withdrawn permission. So I just have to go, he asked quietly. Yes. No explanation. No apology. Just alignment with reality. He walked out slowly, not defeated, but adjusted. Like he'd discovered that time, here wasn't something you negotiated with. In Banff, I overheard a man ask a ranger where they'd store the mountains overnight. The ranger paused. Store? The man nodded confidently. Yeah, like when tourists leave. For a second, no one spoke. Then the ranger replied, perfectly calm. They stay here. The man blinked. All of them? That question wasn't a joke. It was an attempt to reconcile scale with logic. He looked genuinely overwhelmed. So no rotation? No maintenance shutdown? The ranger shook his head. No. That answer landed like gravity. The man stared at the mountains again, longer this time. Not as scenery. As something that didn't respond to him at all. And that's when the humor disappeared for a second. Because he wasn't confused anymore. He was recalibrating. When something is too big, people shrink it mentally. Turn it into a system, a service, a process. Because systems can be understood. Controlled. Scheduled. But Canada keeps breaking that instinct. It refuses to scale down. So visitors try to make it smaller in their minds. And when that fails, they don't laugh immediately. First, they pause. That pause is everything.
What do you think about this story? Write please in comments and subscribe. Thank you.
At a ferry terminal in British Columbia, I watched a man try to board after the gate had closed. The ferry was still there. Engines humming. He knocked lightly on the glass. Hey, I'm here, he said, smiling. The worker looked at him. Boarding is closed. He laughed. But it hasn't left. The worker nodded. Correct. Silence followed. He held up his ticket like it might change the answer. I paid for this one. The worker didn't react. Yes. That was it. No argument. No explanation. Just confirmation without flexibility. The man stood there, staring at a ferry he could see, but couldn't access. That's when it hit. Presence wasn't permission. And time, once passed, didn't reopen itself for anyone. At a gas station in Manitoba, I watched a man stare at a coin slot like it was optional. I already pumped, he said, holding cash in the air. The cashier nodded. You pay here. He frowned. After? She nodded again. Yes. He paused. So you trust me? She blinked. No. That's how it works. That answer didn't reassure him. It confused him more. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. But what if I just leave? The cashier didn't react. Then you didn't pay. He waited for the rest, penalty, warning, threat. Nothing came. Just a statement. He looked around, almost expecting hidden enforcement. Cameras, guards, something. But the system didn't chase. It recorded. And that difference made him hesitate longer than any alarm would. At a bookstore in Vancouver, a man asked if he could borrow the book for a few hours. Just to read outside, he added, smiling like it was reasonable. The employee blinked once. You can buy it. He laughed. No, I mean temporarily. She nodded slowly. We sell books. The repetition wasn't rude. It was structural. There was no version of this interaction where his idea existed. He tried again. I'll bring it back. She held eye contact. You can buy it. Same tone. Same sentence. No variation. That's when he stopped explaining. Because explanation assumes flexibility. And there wasn't any. He looked at the shelves differently after that. Not as shared space, but as something clearly defined. Access had rules. And they didn't expand just because you asked nicely. There's a moment where people stop negotiating and start observing. You can see it in their posture. Less leaning forward. More stillness. Because they realize the system isn't resisting them, it's simply not designed to include their request. And once that clicks, the energy shifts. Not outward anymore. Inward. That's when the real adjustment begins. In a small diner in Winnipeg, I watched a man try to split a bill 6 different ways, with exact customization. He had fries but only ate half, so I'll cover 30% of that, he said, pointing around the table. The server nodded once. One bill. He laughed. No, I mean detailed. She repeated, same calm tone. One bill. Silence landed like policy. He looked around for support. His friends avoided eye contact. So how do people usually do it? He asked. The server replied instantly. One person pays. That wasn't advice. It was structure. He leaned back slowly, recalculating something deeper than money. Not cost, control. The system didn't optimize for fairness. It optimized for simplicity. And it wasn't interested in his version of precision. At a train station in Quebec City, I saw a man try to hold the doors open after the warning beep. Wait, he said, stepping forward. The doors didn't slow. Didn't react. They closed anyway, gently but firmly. He stepped back, startled. A staff member nearby said quietly, "You don't stop them." The tone wasn't cautionary. It was factual. He laughed nervously. What if someone's inside? The staff member looked at him. Then they're inside. No drama. No urgency. Just clarity. The man stared at the train like it had ignored him personally. Because it had, but not intentionally. That's what unsettled him. It wasn't rejection. It was indifference. And that's harder to argue with than any rule. In a souvenir shop near Niagara Falls, I overheard a man ask if he could upgrade the waterfall experience. Like a premium viewing tier, he explained. The cashier blinked. You can go closer. He nodded. But like VIP access. She paused. It's water. That answer didn't land immediately. He stood there, processing nature as a product that refused to package itself. So there's no better version, he asked slowly. The cashier shook her head. No. That's when his expression changed. Not disappointment, confusion. Because everything in his world had tiers. Options. Levels. And here was something massive, impressive, completely fixed. No upgrade. No enhancement. Just itself. He walked out quieter than he entered, like he'd just been denied a feature that didn't exist. That's the deeper clash. Not rules vs behavior, but expectation versus design. Some systems are built to adapt. Others are built to hold. Canada leans toward holding. And when someone expects movement and finds none, it doesn't feel like resistance. It feels like emptiness. Like pressing a button that was never connected to anything in the first place. At a border checkpoint near Quebec, I watched a man hand over his driver's license with confidence. That's enough, right? He said casually. The officer looked at it, then back at him. Passport. The man smiled. We're just stepping in for lunch. The officer didn't react. Passport. Same tone. No escalation. Just repetition that slowly removed his assumption piece by piece. He leaned in slightly. We're not staying. The officer nodded once. Passport. That was the entire exchange. No explanation of why. No emotional shift. Just alignment with a rule that didn't adjust itself to intention. The man stood there, holding the wrong document like it had betrayed him. Not angry, just quietly realizing he brought confidence to a place that required something else entirely. In a quiet library in Toronto, I saw a man take a call at full volume. Yeah, I'm inside, it's fine, he said, pacing slowly. Heads turned, but no one spoke. No confrontation. Just silence thickening around him. A librarian approached. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just precise. You need to step outside. He nodded, still on the phone. Didn't move. She waited. Not repeating herself. Not raising her voice. Just standing there. That stillness did something. His voice dropped slightly. Then again. Then he looked around, finally noticing the room had shifted without him. He ended the call mid-sentence and walked out. No argument. No resistance. Just quiet correction. The system didn't fight him. It surrounded him until adjustment became the only option. At a grocery store in Halifax, I watched a man scan items at self-checkout faster than the machine could process. This thing's lagging, he muttered, moving ahead anyway. The screen froze. A staff member approached. You're going too fast. He laughed. That's not a problem. She shook her head slightly. It is here. The phrasing wasn't defensive. It was territorial. He stepped back, watching the machine reset itself slowly, like it needed time to recover from him. So I have to go at its speed, he asked. She nodded once. No elaboration. That's when he adjusted, not because he agreed, but because nothing else worked. And that's the key difference. You don't follow the system because it convinces you. You follow it because it doesn't move. That's what all these moments share. Not failure. Not stupidity. Just a quiet collision between expectation and structure. People arrive with logic that works somewhere else, and watch it dissolve here without argument. No one fights them. No one explains too much. The system just stays. And eventually, almost gently, they change. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to fit into something that never needed them to understand it.
My dear friends, did you like these stories? If so, like and write in the comments what topics you would like to hear the next stories on. Thank you. Good luck.